Okay, guys, let's call this together and get going. I'm Mark Snowden with the Cincinnati Area Baptist Association, and we have an opportunity today to hear from a guy that I call if there's conflict in a church and we need some help or training. Unfortunately, Dwayne Lee and I have had that experience, but I want you to know I had a more incredible experience with Dwayne Lee, spending a couple of weeks with him in Israel. One of the things that Dwayne and his wife do is do the Bible Comes to Life, and you may be hearing about that a little bit more. But Dwayne is with the State Convention of Baptists in Ohio. He actually is one of the few guys on their staff that is actually outside of Columbus. He's in Hamilton, and he is the point of contact for our association with the State Convention. And it's been a great ride being able to work with Dwayne, have that relationship, but also rely upon him for counsel, advice, and especially when you talk about not just conflict management, but conflict resolution. I told Dwayne that if we're going to do this, I want this to be aimed positive and just not trying to manage something, but actually bring resolution. So if you would, Dwayne, come, and the time is yours, and we look forward to having you with us today.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. I know pretty much all of you, or at least been introduced well enough to know that we've seen each other before, and so I told Mark that I am grateful for the privilege and the opportunity to be able to stand before you today to give you some insights, some thoughts. But I told him, I said, out of all of my years of ministry and out of all of my years of helping churches with conflict resolution and even in some instances being an arbitrator, unfortunately, had to get out my black and white striped shirt. But, you know, out of all of that, I have never done a conference. And so I basically pulled all of my stuff together and put together a conference. And so what I'm going to ask you at the end of this is what I need to change, what I need to maybe do differently, because after a couple of other folks have found out that I was coming to help you, they said, well, we want to be next. And so I said, well, that's okay, that's good, because I got a ton of information, ton of experiences that I can share with you and all of that, but I just simply want to make sure that this is something that is well worth your time. And so I certainly do want to say thank you for making an effort to be here and to gain some insight, because we're certainly talking about something that nobody really wants to talk about, and yet being in ministry, we're in it, not all the time, but we're in it. And so we need a good way to take care of that. Let me also say too that on behalf of the convention itself, I've been a part of the convention now for 13 years. Steve Hopkins is our team leader, and just a wealth of information and resources, and just a great guy to get to know. And our group in particular loves the church. And we want to do everything that we can, and I certainly appreciate what Mark had to say, but we want to do everything that we can to help the church in whatever area that it is in. I mean, yes, we do conflict resolution, but my main areas of concentration when they brought me on 13 years ago was Sunday school and small group, vacation Bible school, and worship. Those were my three big hats. Well, since then, of course, we have all of those other underlying things, you know. If you happen to be in the office and your door's open, you're probably going to get something else. You've been there. But the other thing that's been added to our plate recently has been church revitalization. So we've had that for about the last 4 years as well. And so, but that's okay. That's okay. We enjoy doing that. And so today I don't want to take too much time in this introduction, but I wanted to give you just a couple of verses that I think are just overall or overarching verses when it comes to conflict resolution. And I really appreciate what Mark said about not just conflict management, but conflict resolution. But first of all, I want to read for you 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3 verses 8 and 9. And it says, "Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another, love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous." Another word, if you're using a different translation, would be the word humble. Okay? "Not returning evil for evil, not reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, blessing, knowing that you were called to this, and that you may inherit a blessing." Now, we could spend some time exegeting that, but we're not. I just want to give that to you just as an overarching verse. The other one that I want to give you is this. It's from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 25, where the Apostle Paul himself says to the church in Thessalonica, he said, "Brethren, pray for us." That's the only thing it says in that sentence. Brethren, pray for us. And so I don't know about you, if the Apostle Paul has the courage to ask a church to pray for us, then I think we ought to as well. I think we ought to be humble enough as we stand before our congregations to be able to look at them and say, "Look, I don't have it all together. I don't have all the answers. So pray for us. Pray for us that we would get it right. And that when we mess up, pray for us that we would get it right." Okay? And here's why. As we get started in this, it was John Maxwell who said this. He said, "Conflict is inevitable. Combat is optional." Now, I don't know if you've ever been there. Thank the good Lord, I have not been there in combat. We, on some instances, were on the verge of that, but for the most part, we were able to avoid that. And so bottom line is, in church life, unfortunately, conflict is an inevitable part of church life. I have found this to be true. As long as there is more than one person in the room, you're going to have two personalities, you're going to have two various commitments, beliefs, and issues that sometimes will cause conflict. Don't know that this has ever been said to you, but it has been said to me. I was here when you got here, and I'll be here when you leave. Anybody ever had that said to them? And so my response to that, when the individual said that to me, said, "Well," I said, "You know what? You may be right, but until then, you and I have to work together." And so, all of that to say this. Since conflict is all around us, bottom line, conflict is not necessarily a good word or a bad word. It depends on how you interpret it, and it depends on how you lean into it and manage it. And so I figure between those that are here today and those that will probably view this later, we need a better understanding of how to interpret and how to manage and how to resolve. When you think about it, all of us could probably say, "You know what? I've had those good moments where things went well, we were able to resolve things quickly, but then we've also had those bad moments as well, to where things kind of sort of got off the rails." But here's the one thing that I've learned. At the end of the day, you and I need to make a determination on the onset of who we are. We need to know ourselves. Why? Because I'm the only person that I can control. The only person that you can control in a conflict situation is you. You can't control anybody else. And so let me ask you a question as we get started this morning. When conflict arises outside of the church, let's say conflict within your marriage or conflict between your children or other family members, those that are outside of the church, answer yourself this question: how do I respond to that conflict? Think about that for just a second. How do I respond to that conflict? And the second part of that question is this: is it different than the way I handle conflict within the church? If the answer to that question is yes, what is it based on? What is it based on? Is it based upon personality? Is it based upon relationship? Is it based upon position? Is it based upon value? Because really, at the end of the day, you are the same person whether you're pulling into the church parking lot or whether you're pulling into your personal driveway. And so the question may be, what is the difference? What is the difference? And facetiously, you may say, well, I got to live with my wife. I don't have to live with the church. That may be true. But you need to really understand who you are. And so it was Thomas Kilmann. I don't know if you know that name, but he is in the philosophical and the psychological world of church conflict and personalities and characteristics and things of that nature. And so he had come up with 5 basic modes or styles when it comes to the approach of conflict. And so what I want to do as we get started, since I said that you basically need to know yourself before anything else, I want to give you those and just give you a generalization of each of those, and then I'm going to ask you to take just a few minutes to try to determine which one you are. Okay? And so the first one that I want to give you is this: a competing person, one that is assertive and uncooperative. Basically, what you're doing is you're trying to satisfy your own concerns at the expense of others. Now, I have come across those pastors that those are basically that's the way they handle things. If I can use this, and I know this is being recorded, but more of a dictatorship kind of thing instead of a team concept. And so, unfortunately, I have to share with them and tell them that, well, look, if it's your way or no way, or your way or the highway, then who's really the bully here? You know, when you think about that, I mean, I get it. I understand that you're the pastor and that you're supposed to be setting tone. You're supposed to be setting direction. But if you want people to follow you, and if we're supposed to be shepherds of those people, we can't be competing when it comes to conflict. Well, they didn't like that, and I wouldn't ask back. So anyway, the second thing is this: collaborating. Collaborating, which means assertive, doesn't mean aggressive, but it means assertive and cooperative. You know, there is one thing I totally forgot to do. Mark, would you mind? I got handouts, man, so you guys don't have to write so much. You just got to fill in the blanks. I apologize. I got so excited about getting started. You can just transfer those notes later, all right? But collaborating means assertive and cooperative. It means that you are in the mode to try to find a win-win solution and completing a satisfied concern between all parties. It means that you'll be satisfied, they will be satisfied, and you will be able to move forward. The third one is this: compromising. Compromising. It is this intermediate stop or pause between the assertiveness and the cooperating or the cooperativeness. Basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to find an acceptable solution that only partially satisfies both yours and their concern. It's what we call splitting the difference. And you get it, you understand it, that compromising might mean to some give and take, the exchanging of concessions or seeking a quick mid-ground solution. And in my opinion, compromise means the outcome would be nobody wins. Really, nobody wins. And yet there are those pastors that would rather do that than lean into the conflict. The problem is when you do that, is that it will begin to fester, it'll begin to mushroom, it will continue to grow, and typically it grows into something else. So it's better to deal with what you have in front of you right then instead of waiting. Number 4, avoiding. Being unassertive and uncooperative. Being unassertive and uncooperative. It basically means you do not want to have anything to do with it. And if you had somebody else, you would hand it off to them, because I got to be honest, for the most part, none of us like conflict. Right? I mean, we don't like conflict coming to our door. We don't mind it so much